Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Tony Bleetman, author of What Could Possibly Go Wrong. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Are you ready to get started?
Yes, we are.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, I would say that you take a blank piece of paper and a pen and you make a list of story titles, just a word or two to remind you of a single story that you want to tell, something that's burning inside you. The next stage, you write little stories around those headings. And I would say that to begin with, the words aren't really that important. It's the direction that narrative takes you. Once you've got that done, you add your dialogue and you begin the edit. And once you've got your individual stories, I think the real skill is to take those individual stories and weave them together into the narrative of a book.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I think the hardest part for me was to find an agent who shares the same passion in your book that you do, and an agent that wants to take you on and represent you and get you a publishing deal. And that was the hardest challenge for me. The biggest obstacle was finding that agent.
So, Tony, what was your process with that, especially for some of our audience that might be wanting to go in that route? So can you tell us a little bit more about your path and how you were able to accomplish your goal?
Well, when I started out, I thought I had a good book, a good product, and I realized that there were two ways of getting a book published. You can either pay for a few thousand copies to be printed with the vague hope of getting it sold or getting it out there, or you can get an agent to take you on. I wasn't quite sure how to do that, and I was actually at work. I'm a doctor by profession, and I was talking to a very nervous elderly lady, and I was trying to make some polite chat just to calm her down a little bit. And I asked her naively, "And what do you do for a living?" And she said, "I'm an author." And I said, "Well, how does that work?" And she told me that the key thing was to engage with an agent, and that was the biggest obstacle for me, was to find that agent and get an agent to buy into the product and represent me and get me the publishing deal.
Excellent. And how were you able to do that? Were you researching these people on social media, through websites? What was your process to find the right person and then to reach out to them?
Well, I did mine from the UK, and this lady who I met told me that there was an organization called the Writers Guild, and the Writers Guild had a list of all the literary agents in the UK. And I started to look at the 200 or so literary agents online, and most of them said the same thing. They said, we get 20 to 30,000 submissions a year, and if you're not a known author, we probably won't even read it. We may not even open the envelope. We do not accept by email. But send us 3 sample chapters and a synopsis. And I spent a whole weekend printing sample chapters and my synopsis and stuffing envelopes. And towards the end of the evening, I came across one agent's website, and he said, "I do accept by email." And then I started to look at this agent, and he represented some very, very big authors. And I thought I hadn't got a hope. And I sent off an email probably about 8:30 at night, and at 5:45 the following morning my phone rang, and he said, "Dear boy, I've been up all night reading your marvelous manuscript. Of course I'll take you on." And that to me was my way into the world of publishing. And having met the agent a couple of days later, it still took the best part of a year until he managed to turn that early manuscript into a published product.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the Writers Guild? Is there a membership in that? Is it directory? Can you tell us a little bit more information about the Writers Guild?
I'm afraid I don't have any information about the Writers Guild. It was just a name given to me, and
Hmm.
I vaguely remember that they had a list of literary agents, which you probably wouldn't need them today. You can just look it up on the internet.
Yeah.
And remember, I did this over 10 years ago, and the internet was not as advanced as it might be today. I'm sure that a simple search for literary agents is going to be a lot easier than going through the Writers Guild. But I'm talking about more than 10 years ago. So I can't claim to be a member of the Writers Guild or know a great deal about them. Um, but they were just a route to get me the contact details for literary agents.
And you make a great point. I mean, these days you can Google it. That wasn't that prevalent 10 years ago. So it's a little bit of a different process. But now you can find it online. You can find it on Google. You can find literary agents on Twitter, in particular, also LinkedIn. So there's many different ways to do it. And you still utilize the same strategies. You were able to find someone that accepted emails. You're able to send them a synopsis of your great book and also several chapters. And clearly that did the job because that agent loved your book and you guys ended up working together.
Yeah, that's right, but I also think the agent has to love you, and I
Hmm.
think that a lot of it is developing a rapport and developing a relationship with the agent. So the agent likes you, and if he likes you, he's going to like your product more and want to do something about it. And I think that personal relationship is hugely important. It was then, and even more so now, when we're looking at publishing more books and diversifying some of the writing that I've been doing. And that personal relationship to me is key because without that, you're just another email submission. You're another stuffed envelope with 3 sample chapters for a wannabe author. You have to get that personal relationship, is my view.
Yeah, connection is critical. Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Well, I have to be honest, and most of the marketing was done by the publishing house. And we're going back 10 years now, and the agent said to me, "Are you on Facebook?" Which was relatively new. I said, "No." And he said, "Are you on Twitter?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Are you on LinkedIn?" I said, "What's LinkedIn?" And he made me open a page and to try and push the book on that. And initially, I don't think it had a great impact. But latterly, as Facebook has become pretty much universal, it is a good route of putting a little update. Oh, I spotted my book in a shop. Here's a picture. I was at the airport. Here's a picture of my book. The other thing, of course, is my book's about my medical adventures, and I am able to drop it into conversation most places when I'm talking to other doctors. Oh yes, but isn't that interesting? I wrote about that in my book. Here's a copy of it. And while you've got the internet open, let me just show you this. And that probably works a little bit. And I think because mine's a book about my profession, I'm able to talk about it in my professional life without bragging too much. But the bulk of I experienced a huge increase in sales after one radio show we did. We got onto a Radio 4 program in the early days, and I've got a screenshot. We went from number 210,000 on Amazon to number 76 on Amazon just for a short time. And I've got a screenshot where I'm slightly ahead of 50 Shades of Grey, slightly ahead, just for one brief moment in time. We outsold that on Amazon, and I've got that as a very proud screenshot. So I think the answer to your question is social media is powerful. The marketing machine behind the publishing house is very powerful, but also developing those personal contacts and managing to fairly subtly get your book into conversation, and people think it's really, really cool, and you can sell a few that way.
Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, I used to read the James Herriot books about being a vet in the Yorkshire Dales, and he wrote one book called Vet in a Spin. And he combines his veterinary activity with his pilot training in the Air Force, which he failed. And my book was about air ambulances, which was about medicine, and it was about flying. And as I was writing my stories, I had in my mind the way that James Herriot had intertwined the story of flying and the story of being a vet. Little stories that fed off each other and prompted each other and took the reader through the book. And that was probably the big. It may not be my favorite book of all time, but it was the book that inspired me, gave me the approach and the writing style that I wanted to adopt for my book, and I found that particularly useful. So that was A Vet in a Spin by James Herriot.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, favorite quotes, I could probably do something Churchillian, but that's quite well worn. But if we're talking about authoring, Terry Pratchett wrote something that I thought was very, very apt. He said, "The first draft is just you telling the story." And that's exactly how I started this interview with you. You write down a list of words to remind you of stories, and then you put words around that structure. And I think that's right. So Terry Pratchett had it right, I think, when he said the first draft is just you telling the story.
Excellent. Well, Tony, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show today. What is the best way for people to find you online?
I don't have a website as such, but I'm easily Googleable, and certainly through Amazon. The book is all over Amazon at the moment, and on some of the major retailers. WH Smith are selling it, Foyles, Waterstones. I don't have my own website. Maybe it's something I should think about.
Got it. Well, Tony, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you very much. Nice talking to you.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.